Welcome, welcome, welcome to this edition of Sagionic 1027. We are so glad you decided to join us today. And with us, I have another one of those guests that are like, you've got to be kidding me. I am so excited to introduce our guest today. But before we tap into her, as a carrier of wisdom, I want to share a little bit about our program. Okay? First of all, if we're created in the image of the Creator, we're created to be creative. Therefore, we have a creative desire to want to create. Okay? So I want you to put your mind in that space today as viewers of this program. Okay? We're created to be creative. So, with our thoughts, we have a choice. Are we going to grab a hold of the negative thoughts that come our direction and build upon those? Or the positive thoughts that come our direction, are we going to say, Lord, I come into agreement with that. Could you show me more? So, we're going to hear from a woman who, perhaps in a time of her life, she was partnering with some what I call oh so special thoughts that were an exact contradictory to who she was created to be. But then she realized, wait a minute, I have a choice. So today's guest is Nike Greene, and I am so excited for the world to learn about you. Today's program is all about you. You get to decide what you share. You get to decide how much you share, where to hold back, right? Where to turn the corners. You get to decide, and I'm going to follow your lead. So, welcome to our program today, Nike Greene.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's so amazing. And I'm so excited to be here.
And you have some on display behind you, a journal and a book. Okay? So, you tell us where you would like to go today with this.
Yeah, well, these are small pieces, right, of my entire life per se, but they are very precious to me in the sense of this is probably something I would have never thought I would do. And the amazing thing is my journey through life has been a lot in ministry. And really the person who really influenced me to write, we were at Creek Prison because I was involved in prison ministry for quite some time. Okay, you too. And so there was a young lady who came to the service, and when they are in trouble, they have to wear basically this orange hoodie
Uh
or
huh.
lime green. And so she came in with the lime green hoodie on, and I was like, oh man, that meant she's probably going to go to SAG. So
Mm.
she walked up to me and she said, hey, they're going to come and get me in a few minutes, but I wanted to be here just so long I'm going to SAG. And she was like, once I leave there, then they're actually going to, transport me to California. And she was like, can you please write your story? And I was like, huh? And she was like, because I want to hear the end of your story and you keep sharing it, but I'm not going to be here. And if you write it, it will transcend your presence. And I was like, whoa, whoa. And she sat there for about 10 more minutes. We were doing worship. And just as she said, they came and got her. And I never seen her again, never heard from her again. And that hit me because being black and being in a very cultural family where we really heighten the oral communication, right, this oral tradition of passing down stories and telling them, and it didn't dismiss that, but it hit me that the written word does transcend our time here on earth. And wow, what would it be like to leave a legacy? Now, I have to admit, that was just a thought at that moment because immediately that thought was taken away with feelings of inadequacy. But that was the first person that told me I needed to share my story. And that was in, oh gosh, 2000 and maybe four. I'm trying to remember. It was like the first year Coffee Creek had opened up. So it's been a while back.
You know, immediately when you were saying that, the written word, right? Let's think of this for a second. Let's partner that with all these things written aforetime were written as examples so that you, through faith, may believe, right? So it's not
Yeah.
just the word of God, because it says they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, you know? And I want you to know, sis, that right now in this spot, I have written down a note, and my note says all the funds to get thousands of books into the hands of all the residences in all the prisons on earth. I call it forth in Jesus' mighty name.
Ooh,
It is
yes.
now written. It is written.
Now you know that look, as Mary and Elizabeth connected and the babies leaped, the babies just leaped right there. Right there.
And
Definitely received
I
that.
am not playing games.
Ooh.
I don't play games with my father. I'm serious. I call this forth. I call this forth because we're going to take it a notch further. Oh my gosh, this is so good, Lord. What he's showing me. We're going to take it a notch further because you do not go and become a resident of a PRISON unless you yourself were imprisoned in a way that you were not created to be. So
Come
we're
on.
going to take the money away from those situations, those type of things in the world that put someone in that position. We're going to take those funds and we're going to turn it around to set people free.
Whew. Absolutely. Freedom is ours, right?
Yes.
And we sometimes don't realize that freedom is ours, that we don't have the ability to walk in that freedom because all we focus on is the chains. We focus on the limitations of those chains, even sometimes after they've been broken. We have worn them so long that we don't even realize we can surpass the distance we've ever gone before. And we learn that way by how they train elephants, right? I mean, we've seen the shackle on the baby elephant, and the baby elephant keeps going, even though the baby begins to grow and realize it can actually break free from the chain. And then finally, they take off the chain, and the elephant never goes past that limited point in which that chain allowed it to go, even though it's free. And I feel like at many times my own personal life is once I gave myself to Christ, once I realized that I had greater in me, the flesh of me still unhealed did not realize that I could surpass these limitations that were actually not even there. It was the falsehood, delusions of limits, right?
That's right. That's
These
right.
areas where it's like, oh, you could never do that. You can never be that. You could never create that. But those weren't real. But in my mind, right, I believe they were real. And
That's
so
right.
just like the baby elephant that turned into an adult, I was an adult holding on to baby restrictions. Free.
And those baby locks are plastic, for goodness sakes, right?
Right.
Those baby locks are plastic, right? And anybody and their
Absolutely.
sister can undo those baby locks and just smash them, right? So you decide how far to the edge you want to take people, but don't take them too far because we want to keep them engaged and we don't want to lose them in their own trauma. Okay, so I would like you to share what does this mean? You know, I'm looking at this book right here, and it says Nike, a memoir from trauma to triumph.
Yeah. Whew. So part of growing up, when my mom named me Nike, the only reference I had was the Nike company. However, she told me right away, she named me because it means victory. And I did not receive that from people. So most of the time throughout my life, and it was, what's your name? And I would say Nike, and then all the jokes would come. Oh, Nike like the shoe and blah, blah, blah. And so right away, I was not proud of my name. I did not embrace the meaning of victory in my name. And when I look at all of the journey that I went through, I started realizing as I got older, I was like, Nike actually means victory. And so I told my husband one time, I was sitting down and it was, oh gosh, probably maybe I was about 25 years old. And I said, you know what would be cool? And he was like, what? I was like, I have this idea. What if I went to Nike and sold him this idea that I would be like, Nike wears Adidas, or does she wear Nike? And I started talking about, look at all the areas in which, we do stuff. And of course, I'm an athlete, and now I'm a coach. And so I was like, it means victory. And he's like, well, what do you? I was like, well, it's more than a name, it's my life. And I have to walk in victory. Now, the funny part about it is I was saying it, but I had not lived it yet. And so that's been my tagline for years on my email: Nike, more than a name, it's my life. And so finally, my husband said, when are you going to write this book about your journey? And I was like, I don't know. I need to write it. And the first time I sat down to think about writing this book, I actually called it The Removal of the Mask. And so when I started writing it, originally, I knew God told me to write it. And I told my husband, I'm going to be real honest. I didn't even know if I was going to publish. I didn't know if I was going to sell it. I had no plan. I just knew I needed to be obedient. And God brought me back to that young lady, and I still don't know her name in prison, that told me to write. So I started writing and then I stopped. I think I wrote maybe 1 or 2 stories of my life. And then I restarted. Like, you know how the enemy will take you back really quickly? And I was being triggered because this is when I started processing my pain, and I was going through my healing journey. And I was brought back, and I remember my 5th grade teacher telling me that I had horrible handwriting. And I'm talking about like literal stylistic handwriting. And I was like, now I'm typing. So this is why it makes no sense, right? So but how quickly, right? Stinking thinking, how the enemy can bring a thought to block, what you're envisioning. And I was like, I can't write this. Like, I'm not a good writer. And then I remembered going to high school and having another teacher tell me, after handing in essays, that I was not a good writer because I wrote the way I spoke, and that academically that was not going to be successful. So I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm having all of this thinking, like, while I'm trying to write. So I push past those to continue to write. I don't finish everything because I'm literally just writing my stories out.
Yeah.
And I'm simultaneously going to college, and my computer crashes. I lose everything.
Oh, no.
And I can't say I was mature. I was like, no worries. I was like, oh, that must be God. He doesn't want me to write this. And I was like, forget it. Because as I'm writing, I am working through and processing memories and trauma that I hadn't thought about before. And then my head was like, you got to start again. So I start doing it again. And then this time it comes out of my family. Well, you're not the writer. Your sisters are the good writers. I mean, they write really good. I hope you let them edit it. And I was like, oh. And then I kid you not, my computer crashes again. And this time they were able to retrieve just very little out of my laptop. And I was like, forget it. This is not for me. My husband's like, no, you know better. And so in short, in 2020, well, actually right before that, in 2018, my daughter was like, you need to write. And I was like, okay, Mom, I got you. And then I finally wanted someone to be accountable. So I told my women's group, I was like, I'm writing, y'all. I'm writing, and I need y'all to hold me accountable. And so I would give them each chapter.
Okay.
And I got up to about 4 chapters, and they would be like, oh my gosh, keep writing. And then life happened. And then 2020, at COVID, my oldest daughter came to me and she said, Mom, you're finishing your book, and I'm going to finish with you. And so we both started kind of writing, and she finished her book before me. And then she's like, go. And we're very competitive. So I was like,
wait, did I
okay,
just hear another interview? Oh, I sure enough did.
yeah, exactly. So that competition around accountability honestly was what it was.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I just rode away during COVID and I was like, I'm going to be transparent. And my tagline that everybody hears me say when I'm speaking is I show my scars so others can heal. And that's what this book is.
Right. That's
It's literally me showing
right.
my scars so that others can heal.
That's right. That's right. Because all scars, no matter the size, no matter the depth, all scars are a scar to the human being that it takes place upon.
Absolutely.
All scars. To somebody who, maybe they thought they grew up in a, I don't want to use that terminology. I want to go over here instead. Watched a movie the other day, and it was about this young kid who, on the outside, looked like he grew up in a perfect home. Very successful looking home, but there was no pure intimacy with communication within the walls of the home. So it was a facade. It was a facade. And that's why, you hear that attaché terminology, don't judge a book by the cover, don't judge a human by the outward appearance, because you don't know the brokenness somebody's been through.
Absolutely. Well, that's my story. I mean, literally,
Yes.
that's what my book is talking about. Because the reason I first said I was going to call it removal of the mask is because I knew how to wear a mask.
Yeah.
And you grow up and people say fake it till you make it. And now you get
Uh-huh.
older and you don't know if you're faking it or you're making it anymore, and you don't know the difference between the fake you and the real you. But I realized I was doing well in what everyone else would believe is success. And
Ah.
so I didn't have the outward appearance in some sense of someone going through. I had good grades. I was very successful athletically, very highly recruited. I was on varsity everything. I was like the president of BSU. I was literally engaged. Everyone called me a leader.
Uh-huh.
What they did not realize, and it wasn't just because, yes, economically we struggled.
Uh-huh.
Honestly, we didn't know we were poor until other people told us we were poor.
Yeah.
And we thought everybody got WIC. We thought everybody, was on food stamps. Like, I mean, we ate every day. My mom was a nurse. She worked her butt off to make sure that she, cared for us. She was born in Denmark and came over in the after the war and met my biological father. Left him very early, and she's trying to raise these black and white kids in the 60s and 70s where there was a lot of racism and hate, and this white woman killed it. My mom like rocked it and worked her butt off every single day, so we didn't realize we were poor.
That's
But there
right.
was always this identity crisis happening on the inside. There was always this search for significance in me, and on the outside I learned how to become a people pleaser, right?
Yeah.
I worked for love. So I feel like it was all performance love. I recognized early on in my life, if I did well, people liked me. And that's exhausting. It's a lot of emotional
Yes.
labor. And when
Yes.
you're tired and everyone tells you, on one end, the adults, and you're like, oh, you're so cute. And at the same time, they're telling you you're ugly. I heard too
Uh-huh.
many things. I was exposed to many things that I learned just smile,
Yeah.
just act like everything's okay because no one really cares anyway. No one's really gonna, how we walk by, how you doing? But we keep walking.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
I felt like that was my life. And so I think this
Mm.
idea of what does hurt look like? What does trauma look like? It looks like every last one of us. We
That's
don't
right.
know,
That's
right?
right.
And so I think I've learned over the years, again, not to judge a book by its cover,
Yeah.
but to really say, do you see me? Do you feel me? Do you yearn for me?
That's
And
right.
you have to be in the presence of people to feel that.
Can I share a picture?
Yes.
Because you don't know what you don't know, right? Here's my family growing up.
Oh my gosh.
So this picture, I gotta put it the right way. This picture was from the 70s. I was probably about 11 years old there. And my dad met my mom. She was a topless dancer. He met her at a club where Navy personnel went, took her to a party, and said, "You're a woman. You're the woman I saw in my dreams." He was from Chicago, Illinois. He goes, "I saw many children and I'm going to marry you." He didn't know she had 5 kids.
Oh, wow.
That man saved my life. Saved,
It's all
saved,
God.
saved our lives. That's God, all God, all God.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know?
God seems to meet us so early on. I tell people all the time, I never pause about talking about the healing of trauma
That's right.
and where it came from. Because many times I'm now a licensed therapist, many times there's a lot of steps, there's a lot of language, there's a lot of things that we can talk about in the healing process. But for me, my story remains that God is my balm in Gilead. He
That's
is the
right.
one that I have always known from a very early age that I've heard his voice. And I say like not audibly through the crowds
Yeah,
cracking
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
loud noise, but as I share in my book around being 16 and feeling alone, feeling like darkness is
Uh-huh.
everywhere, as we had
Uh-huh.
just finished an amazing basketball game. I'm at the height of, what people would say your athletic career is as a junior in high school. And I performed at peak level,
That's right.
super excited. And I'm going to the bench. I'm taking off my shoes after you high fived everyone. And the gym is like super loud and everybody's just excited because we're now going to the next level for our state playoffs. And an individual comes and he sits next to me, kind hearted, all good intentions, a great person in my life. Most of them were men and coaches in basketball. Puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "Nike, you did an amazing job." And I'm like, "Yeah, thanks, thanks." Wiping the sweat off my brow, feeling really good. And he was like, "Yeah, it's so bad, that your mom couldn't be here to support you tonight." And he kept going. And it wasn't the first time my mom had missed a game, but it was a very essential game. And it was that moment that I could hear nothing else. And I just heard, "Couldn't support you." And it was like a sounding brass. It just kept going, going, and going. And in one instance, this was the best thing ever. Like I got recruiters ready to do everything for me. I'm eating every night. I'm going into a work day every night. My mom hugged me. So I want to make sure the picture is clear. My mom was amazing. We were latchkey kids. She had 4 kids that she was raising all by herself. And I call my cousin. We'll talk about that later. They're your cousin, but they're not your cousin. So I go to my cousin's house.
That's your sister. Your sister.
Right. So I go to my cousin's house and I look in the mirror, and every negative thing that anyone ever told me came in like a flood. I can't describe it any other way than just knowing it was almost like it was audible and there was a movie that had been short clips of people saying, "You're ugly, you're not black enough, you're not white enough, you can't do that because you're a girl. Your nose is big, your forehead is big. Look at your messed up hair. Why won't you do this better? Why don't you dress better? Oh, look at your pants." It was like every negative thing that had ever been said about me just became amplified. And I remember opening up the mirror. You have those medicine
Yeah,
mirrors, and
yeah,
I don't know if they have them anymore.
yeah.
But I remember opening up the mirror because I didn't want to look at myself anymore because I felt really, really ugly. And of course, my hair was a mess. I just played a game,
Yeah.
and there were nothing but bottles of pills of my cousin's dad. I don't even know where the thought came from other than the enemy. And I was like, you know what? They won't miss me if I'm gone. And it was in that moment I was oblivious of any support, any friends, of any family, of anything. And I was in a dark place that I'd never been before. And that's when I tried to take my life. I took a bunch of pills. And then I walked to a street called Willamette, where there's a bluff and a cliff. And I sat there and I cried and I cried and I cried. And without a doubt, this was my experience. I heard the voice of God say, "Nike, what are you doing?" And I was mad at God. And I was like, "Where are you? I thought you was real. I thought you loved me. If you were real, then why is this happening, right? I'm having this really strong teenage adolescent conversation with God because I'm angry. You know, why did you create me like this? Why did you create me so messed up, so ugly, so broken? And at 16, I remember God saying, I created the heavens and earth. I created the water. I created the waves. I created the mountains. I created the animals. What do you think that when I got down to you, that I made a mistake?
Oh,
I make no mistakes, Nike. You are great. Get up. I plainly as day. And I was just like, and then at that point, I don't know if that's like I'm out of that moment, but I was out of that moment and I could feel myself just exhausted feeling. And I was like, oh, my heart starts beating really bad. And I was like, oh, crap. I'm about to die. This took some pills. Like, I'm literally about to die. And I just began to cry and cry. I'm like, oh God, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Um, and I remember heading back to the house. I made it back to the house, I guess. There was an ambulance there. I don't remember much after that other than waking up um, on the couch and my coach, my basketball coach, being at the door. And I was scared because I thought he was going to be angry with me. And he came in, and I remember crying. I was like, he's going to reject me. He's going to be disappointed. He's not going to want to work with this like messed up package anymore. Shame had fallen all over me, like many others who go through suicidal attempts. And he did what this today maybe coaches aren't supposed to do, but he leaned over and he said, I love you on and off the court. I'm so sorry that I didn't know. You could always come and talk to me. And he's been in my life ever since. Even to this day, he is in my life. He is an amazing, amazing coach, but he was more than that. But no one knew because I knew how to wear a mask. No one knew the pain and the darkness I was holding from being molested very early on in life. They just did not know, but God knew.
that's right. That's right. That's right. You know, there's a song from back in the day, and I would just like viewers to get a glimpse of what this little clip I'm going to share, because when we move forward, you're going to want to be where Nike Greene walks. And this little clip goes like this. Once like a bird in prison I dwelt, no freedom from my sorrow I felt. But Jesus came and listened to me, and glory to God, He set me free. He set me free, yes, He set me free. He broke the bonds of prison for me. I'm glory bound, my Jesus to see. Glory to God, He set me free.
Mhm. Yes, I love it. It is that set that freedom. Every one of us have this opportunity that we come into a crossroad
That's right.
or we face what we call ambiguity.
Uh-huh.
And the crux of my journey from trauma to triumph was that very thing. I had came to that point of conflict that I had to make a choice. My husband and I had gotten in an argument, and I think we had at that time only two of our children. And we would always say, we don't argue in front of our kids. So we are up in our room and we're, I don't even know what we're arguing about, but we're arguing. And he grabs my shoulders and he's like, Nike, stop. I am not going to hit you. And I was like, what? And he's like, look at you. Look at your hands. And I looked down and my hand was in a fist. And he's like, I'm not him. I will never hurt you. Now, what he was responding to is I had went through domestic violence and he knew some of my story. And I didn't just receive it, to be honest. I was, we're in the middle of an argument and this is what you're talking about, right? You just don't want to argue with me, right? I want to win. I told you I was competitive. So I'm like, he's deflecting.
Yeah.
But he then went on and he was like, you got to go get healed. You're never going to be as great as God called you unless you get healed from this. And I was kind of mad. Honestly, as he's talking to me, I'm just like, I feel the love, but the resistance in that moment. Because I'm like, I'm healed. I'm okay, right? I'm not with him anymore. And he's just like, there's so much greatness in you, but you've got to be healed. You've got to be healed if this really is going to work. And this was we were referring to as our marriage.
Yeah.
And he was like, you're going to be an amazing mother. There's so much more out there if you just get healed. And I pondered on that for a while. I was angry for a few reasons. Number one, I wanted to win the argument that we were no longer having. Number two, I realized where I thought I had scars, they were actually wounds. And I always tell you there's a difference, right? When you touch a wound, it hurts because it's still infected. It has not had the covering of a healing layer of protection, right? So when you touch a wound, ow, I need you to, and I thought I had a scar. I can touch my scars all day and they don't hurt at all. But he touched a place where I thought I had a scar and recognized it was a wound. And I thought that was unfair. I didn't want to be vulnerable. I thought I was good. And lastly, I recognized there were places in my past I just didn't want to go. I didn't want to go there no more. I didn't want to relive or rehash per se. And lastly, I didn't know how. You're telling me to go get healed? What does that mean? What does that look like? I don't know what that means. We don't go to therapy. That's what rich white people do. And let me say, I mean rich white people, right? Because my mama white. Like, you don't air out your dirty laundry. I'm like, what does that mean? And he didn't have an answer. But the one thing that stuck with me was there was actually something out there that was in me that was better than my current situation. This was not as good as it gets. It was as if he had took the seed of hope that had been removed from my life and put it back in. And in that moment, I was like, whoa, okay, I got to commit to this. I have no idea what I'm committing to. I don't even know what it looks like. No one's talking about trauma, not like today, right? Everyone's trauma.
That was before PTSD ever existed. There was no labels back then.
No labels, no titles. All I knew was, broken. And I'm a church girl. So I'm like, hey, I know, forgiveness, whatever. I forgive you and move on. But it was that started my journey. And it was coupled with, I had already made the decision that I wanted to be a therapist. And that was a whole nother story. But I decided to go to school because I realized.
No. We got to pause there. We got to
Okay.
stay this moment for a second, okay? And this is why. I want you to walk viewers through what it was like, because this was probably before computers were the way they are today. Okay, this is cell phones were barely getting kicked out, right? And so take us back to having to potentially look in the yellow pages, having to find where you were going to go, getting yourself choosing to get yourself in that car, choosing to get out of the car, choosing to walk through that door of that counselor's office. I want you to take viewers there.
Yeah. So ironically enough, I had registered for school for therapy, and they require you in this counseling program to do 12 hours of therapy. And I think that was God, because it became a requirement.
Okay.
Because I had looked before and I was like, I can't find any therapists. I can't afford a therapist because I didn't have a job that could get me a therapist. And I didn't want to sit around and talk to a therapist and explain everything about me. So my first attempt was unsuccessful. But I began to look around, and I literally did. I was like going through, I was calling folks. I'm like, do you guys know any therapists? I was like, I want a woman, first of all. I did not want a man. And that was because I had an accountability partner
Uh-huh.
that I kind of tapped into, and she was very strong. And she said, do not get a man because that is what you like to do because you don't want to be vulnerable. And I was like, whoa. It's like, okay. Because she's like, you know how to not be real in front of men. And so I'm like, okay.
Oh gosh.
So I asked a friend in the school that I had just by happen to be in class with, and she said, "Hey, there's this amazing lady, and she's a Christian." Because that was concerning to me. I didn't want to get into some space where they're like tap into your whatever.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah.
no, I'm tapping into Jesus.
Yeah.
Um, and I wanted someone who had some cultural competency,
Uh-huh.
that would be able to not ask curiosity questions, but would allow me just to be me.
Yes.
And she referred me to a lady, and I had been referred to another person as well. And I remember calling to set the first appointment, scared as I don't know what. I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna they're gonna think I'm crazy, right? That word, I'm crazy now. And I called, and it was a voicemail, and I was like, I was looking for reasons not to go. I was like, okay, so I leave a message, and I get an email back because I left all my information. She's like, oh yeah, I'm available. I'm like, crap. So I remember the first day, I'm pulling up into the parking lot and my heart is racing. I'm so scared. And I'm like making deals with myself. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to go all into my messy stuff. I'm like, all the things I'm not going to do. I'm making a list. I'm going to be strong and we're just going to get through this. And she'll give me 3 pointers, do 1, 2, and 3. And then this is going to be good. I'm going to be fixed. I don't need 12 sessions, but that's what's in my head.
Okay.
And so I walk into the building, and you open the door, and it's just a waiting room, and there's another door. There's no receptionist. There's just a sign that says, push this button, and you have to find like which therapist you were. Just push the button, and they'll know that you're here. And I'm like, I'm in this little old room, no receptionist. Low key, I'm like, this is ghetto.
Now, that was preparing you to go into Coffee Creek and minister. Because when
Right?
those steel gates come down, you're like, the first time you go in, those steel gates come down, and you're like,
Yes.
whoo, okay, I can keep walking. I can keep walking.
Right. I have no idea what she looks like. I have no idea like what I'm about to meet. And I'm in this like small room, and it wasn't cold, but it definitely was cold to me because
Yeah,
I was hoping I was going to talk to a person and say, hi, welcome. Who are you going to see today? Right. There's nobody there. There's a button.
yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm an early person. So I'm there 15 minutes early thinking, I wouldn't be alone. And now I'm like sitting. So I push the button. I'm sitting for 15 minutes. And I'm obviously much younger then, but I felt like I was literally going through perimenopause because I'm like sweating and like trying to find the water. I'm like, I'm having a panic attack.
Oh,
Literally. And
God.
I have no idea why I am so like anxious.
Yeah.
And I remember her opening the door, and she was like, hi, Nike. And as small as that is, most people they just will not enunciate my name correctly. They'll
Yeah.
see it and just be in disbelief. It cannot be Nike. It'll be Nikki. And that was kind of like my setup in my brain. She doesn't say my name right. I'm so done already. And she said, hello, Nike. And I remember she goes, just come with me. And we walked back, but there was a calmness and a sturdiness about her. And we walk in, we sit down. There's no bed. What like the movies? I wasn't sitting on a bed like, oh, let me just fill out my life.
No leather chase lounge, huh?
No lounge chairs. And she sat down, and her demeanor, her presence was calming. It rested me. I sat down and it was nice, and like the room was set. It was warm colors. It wasn't stoic and white or institutional. And then she asked me my very first question, which I thought was going to be, give me your name and your address, and we can make sure everything on the intake form was right. And she just said, what brings you in today? And I'm like, oh, and I can feel the tears coming up. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not crying. Why am I crying? I'm not crying. And in that moment, I felt for the first time safe to share anything. I knew it wouldn't be held against me. Now, don't get me wrong, we did have to build that therapeutic trust, but I knew it was okay for me to just be Nike. She didn't know anything. She didn't have nothing to hold judgment or critique over my life. And I was just proud, like, I'm here. I can either take advantage of this or I could just go through the process. And I was like, no, I'm gonna take advantage of this. And we started the process of going through those roadblocks in my life where I was carrying baggage of so much pain and trauma from the beginning of the pool situation, right? And then moving toward just those ideas of my identity and dealing with depression, really, really feeling depressed about things that I know God did not create me to feel. And so as we walked through these 12 sessions that, remember, I didn't need, I saw God in places in my life I never saw him. I did not understand the theodicy question. I did not understand where was God in suffering. I did not understand that I could go back and see Jesus in the pool. I did not know that I could go back and see Jesus sitting next to me on that cliff. I didn't know that I could go back and see Jesus with me during my domestic violence because I thought he left me. I thought it was my fault. And it took my ability to be open and willing to go back through those, carefully orchestrated, of course, that was not re-traumatizing, but very healing.
You know, and if we think of it, well, in my mind, I'm like, those 12 sessions were a tax write-off, right? That's my business plan
Exactly.
right away because you're about to go to college, right? So those 12 sessions were a tax write-off. If you didn't claim them then, pull those records back up
Right.
and claim them now. That could be a
Pull the
trip.
receipt.
That could be a trip. That could be a trip somewhere for real, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So, I've heard it said before that if you try to pry into someone's mind to try to heal them when they're not ready, it's like emotional mental rape. Can you, for other people who see, maybe perhaps they're walking, I want to be careful how I say this. We're just going to stick with the word wounded. For others who see wounded people around him, do you want to share a word of discreet, graceful caution to them? How because like that coach who said that to you, that took your mind a total different direction out of your victory celebration.
Right. And he would never know that, right? I think
No.
when we think about trauma informed care, we move away from why did that happen to you to tell me what happened to you, right? And part of it is the why, when we think about trauma, is very shaming because most of us don't know why, right? And the moment you're asking people to get into a why, you're asking them to go to a part of their brain around cognition that trauma actually impairs that function. So it puts you back into this triggering anxiety. So you think about trauma, there's the event itself,
Okay.
and then that's just whatever happened to us, right? And so trauma is not just our daily day, I'd stub my toe, right? These are events that have threat upon our life, our emotion, our physical being, and they basically impair our ability to cope not just with that stressor that the event caused, but later the impacts, right? There's the experience. We attribute meaning to that experience. We bring personal narratives to that experience, which also bring in the effect of that trauma. And so we have problems with building relationships, trusting and benefiting from those relationships. It impairs our cognitive thinking and our emotions. There's so much there that we, as one researcher says, we're a lot of times stuck in that adolescent age. So we will think always that 7-year old, right? Emotion around relationships and attachment. We go back to that moment where we were raped or we were abused, and we can get stuck there, and our memories are impaired. So when we think about trauma informed care, you have to be able to, number one, remember there. First, let's just recognize that there is meaning attached. And instead of running back to the memory, tell me more about what happened to the meaning. Tell me about you in that moment. Because most of the time when I walked through my trauma with the swimming pool, I was scared to talk about literally me and what happened. And my therapist said, what was exciting about that day before you got to the pool?
Yes.
Right? Before you got to the pool. And I was like, man, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I was excited because I had wore my best swimming suit.
That's right. With the polka
It was
dots.
new. Yes, it had polka dots on it. I was so excited because guess what? I love swimming. I love the splashing of the water. I love the sounds. Everything was amazing. And we forget that in trauma that all that stuff disappears. And we would only go into that moment where that place that meant joy and family and community and exercise and just swimming, right? Regular activities during the summer that brought people together. It turned into a very dark place. And she brought me back to, wait a minute, that was a beautiful place. The darkness was that person
That's right.
that hurt you. You're not dark. You're beautiful. You're amazing, right? And so a lot of times when people are traumatized, we want to jump to a memory of pain instead of pulling out and just say, I don't want to do that. You don't have to. Because usually people want to lean in out of curiosity. That is
Yeah.
not our role. We
Yeah.
don't need to
Yeah.
know the story.
Yeah.
They
That's right.
know the story.
That's
Where we
right.
connect, I tell people all the time, the reason I connect with people, the reason I finally, finished my book, the reason I finally published it and said, okay, I'll go ahead and put it out there, is because there's so many women like you and I that have gone through trauma, but we don't stop there. We're not trauma bonding, but we have moved to triumph. And when we meet other women like ourselves, our stories are thousands of difference.
That's
But
right.
where we connect on, we understand abandonment, we understand neglect, we understand the pain, we understand frustration, we understand the ups and downs, we understand anxiety, we understand anger, we understand so many things that pulls us together, even though our narratives may be different. And it's in those moments where we can pause and say, take a deep breath. We have to watch people's behavior. Watch their eyes. They tell you. Watch the tensing of their shoulders and their hands. Watch the physical reactions that trauma gives. And then you're able to pause and say, whoa, I need to make sure you know that you're safe. Let's take a deep breath. Put your feet on the floor. No one's hurting you right now. Reaffirming them as they're processing. Every time you feel like you're isolated, repeat, you're not alone. And there's ways that we can not re-traumatize individuals because it's not a one and done. It's a process, and we got to encourage them. It's a process. You don't have to figure it out today.
That's really good. It made me think of two things. One, Dr. Caroline Leaf, who I know you'd be familiar with her. Okay. She's a neuropsychologist, Dr. Caroline Leaf. And she says that all memories are encased in emotional storehouses. So picture like a teardrop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are the motions. Well, as you're talking, I see the teardrop, and in the teardrop, it houses the memory, but between the memory and the teardrop is amniotic fluid. And I hear something, you might want to write this down.
I like that.
Finally being delivered.
Yes.
That's a book.
Come on. Well, so we know this by memories, right? So our biggest memories in our life are usually tied to our biggest emotion,
That's right.
anger or joy.
That's right.
So if you ask someone literally today and you just say, tell me about your earliest childhood memory, which you hear a lot of therapists say, they're going to go to one of those,
That's
right?
right.
And they're gonna, oh my gosh, I remember my first birthday party, right? And they're gonna talk about the joy that they have, or they're gonna be like, I remember being at the funeral. And they'll talk about this strong, severe emotion that is attached. And either way, whatever the starting line is, that gives us a place of what I call a counter narrative, right? Because
Uh-huh.
most of the time when we are suffering from trauma, we usually only go to those painful places. And we have to find a way to steer individuals to find joy again, which becomes a foundation for us to return to, like home base, right? When you're playing
That's
tag
right.
outside,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh man, get to home base
Yeah.
and you can start over. And so bringing them back to that base of joy, that counter narrative to our brain so we can rewrite the script
That's
when
right.
we're triggered. So if I walk into a room and I smell the coffee and I smell the cologne and I see something that reminds me and it triggers me and it takes me back there to that man that abused me, I need to have a home base to
That's
come back to
right. That's
that
right.
says, I'm safe, I'm good,
Mm.
I'm covered, and I have a
Mm-hmm.
choice on how I respond. I don't have to go into fight, flight, freeze. I'm okay. Right? I have to be able to learn how to regulate those emotions again. And for us that really believe in the faith and are Christians, our
Mm-hmm.
whole base is Jesus and God.
Mm.
This is God,
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
wow. Not only am I safe in your arms, but God, I pray right now that there must be something in me that I still need healing from because that's not happening right now, but I feel that it is. So God, reveal to
Mm.
me those areas of my life that I need complete healing.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. And so if we were to ask a question, okay, the thought that comes to me is, what is it that you're actually longing for? Right? Let's remove Jesus Christ out of this scene. Let's remove God. Let's remove the creator. Let's remove any form of I'm going to call it structural um, human developed system. Okay, let's remove it all. It's just naked you on earth. Okay, it's naked you on earth. Okay, just straight up naked you on earth. Okay,
Yes.
and if the question were to be asked to every human being, what is it that you really are longing for? Because that's where the
Yeah.
reactions are. Think about that. What are you?
Yeah.
What is it? Because any form of frustration comes because there's an unmet need, or you're
Absolutely.
misinterpreted, you're not understood, you're
Yep.
da 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 da. So think of that.
Yeah.
What is it that you're looking for? What are?
Yes. I think it's going to sound textbook like, but
No, come
honestly,
on,
I
let's
was
go.
I was literally searching for two things: significance and love.
That's right.
I needed purpose in my life that was bigger than me. I needed to know I'm here on this planet for a reason,
That's right.
right? And I was open and willing to anything. And I needed to feel like I belonged. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be appreciated. I wanted to know that there are people out in this world, including my family and my community, and that they loved Nike, right? Without anything attached. I didn't have to perform for it. I want it for the very existence. I wanted to know my very existence was created for a purpose and could be loved just because I existed. And that's what I was looking for. And I think that's why sometimes we get lost. But it was literally what I wanted. I wanted a search for significance and a search to be loved just because I existed. Nothing
Mm-hmm.
more.
Mm-hmm. It almost sounds like a birthright, right? Oh,
Yes.
almost like longing for a birthright.
Yes. And in a society where most of those are taken from us, right? We're told all the things that we don't have access to, that we
Uh-huh.
should not have. And
Uh-huh.
very early on, I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to be completely loved because now I'm in a home that has no father.
Uh-huh.
So I grew up thinking he didn't love me enough to change his life. Because if he really loved me, he would have stopped doing drugs. He would stop, messing around. He would have changed his life as a child, as a young daughter. Anybody could tell me anything they wanted, but I always yearned for a father.
Uh-huh.
My mother was amazing, but she was never my father. She was my mother. And it
Uh-huh.
made it difficult at times for me to understand who I was because I've always held this thing of, well, they all have dads. All my friends have fathers in their homes. And I just assume they're great. Because why? Because I'm a kid. And that's, of course, what you do. And back then, most adults didn't do things in front of their kids like they do now. So I felt like all my friends had moms and dads for the most part. And I didn't have a dad. And so that search for significance of how is it that I'm this abandoned kid that doesn't have a father who loves her enough to be loved. And so it just kind of, I started feeling, so now I'm unsafe, I'm unprotected. I don't have all the things that I thought that I should need. I watched, I'll tell this one short story. My second born, we had two girls and a boy. My second born, amazing. Then I got to my son. But my second born was sitting, very, I think she's maybe one. And my husband started very, he'd throw her up in the air and catch her, throw her up in the air, catch her, throw her up in there, catch her. And it would always make me scared and nervous. And I remember one day they were in the kitchen and she's jumping off the counter. And I'm like, babe, don't keep doing that, safety mom, be mean. And she's, they'd go 1, 2, 3, and she would jump into his arms. And they would do it again, 1, 2, 3. So one day we're sitting in the living room and somehow I hear 1, 2, and I look at my husband with fears. I'm like, oh my God. And he just starts laughing. He's laughing and he slowly gets up and he walks into the kitchen and I hear 2 and she's like saying 3 and and I'm like, run. And he's just walking slow and she says 3, she jumps, he catches her and they're laughing and laughing. And then I hear her saying 1 again. I go into the kitchen and I watch and I see the eyes of my second born daughter jumping into the hands of her father with no fear, no hesitation. And in that moment, I was like, whoa, this is what it would have been like to have a father growing up. And I kid you not, watching my daughters grow up with my husband and their father, seeing him get them ready for prom, seeing him tell them how beautiful and amazing they are, seeing him chase boys away. I have found healing in that God has always been my father,
Mm-hmm.
and He has placed other people strategically in my life all along the way that actually said and did many of those same things. So I was never without love. I just didn't know how to see it because it wasn't defined to me. But I truly believe it's that search for love and significance that we all want. We just have given a definition to it in a package that we have to realize it doesn't have to look like that. Don't worry about putting it in like it looks like this, but really understanding what love is, what is significance. And I promise you, you will find it in a healthy way that doesn't look like something that beats on you.
That's right. That's right. I do not even know where this time went because I'm like, you said real quick, like, I'm like, why does she think she needs to share real quick? Like, we've just got tons of time left, right? Um, But I would like you to do something. I would like our viewers to you can have on the least amount of garment you feel comfortable with. Okay. I want you to remove every single human being you've ever known. And the color, you could be anywhere on the Earth's landscape that you desire. Anywhere on the Earth's landscape you desire. I want to re emphasize that. It's just you, there's no one else. Okay. Now, Nike, you're going to take us through 3 different avenues to go back to the basis to heal human. You're going to walk our viewers through it.
Mm.
And I gave you 3 for a reason.
Whew. 3 for healing. First, sit and be quiet. Listen to your body. And this is just number 1. In this sitting in this space, listen to your body. Listen and think about the fact that there are places in your life right now that you are hurting. And you can identify them by realizing where you don't want to go, things you don't want to deal with, things that you say, oh, I'm just not going there no more. So first, just sit quietly and just ask God to reveal to you these areas. Number 2, write them down. Write them down. What you're doing is you're literally putting a staple there and you're proclaiming right now, enough is enough. There is greatness in me that I want to tap into. My purpose is so much more important than holding on to this. I will no longer be shackled by this pain and this suffering. The last thing is I want you to envision the finish line and know that you're worthy of the prize. Envision yourself completely healed. Envision yourself no longer having nightmares, no longer having back pain or headaches. Envision yourself no longer walking into spaces and feeling inadequate or like you're not enough. Envision the finish line of your life where you are completely and totally being everything that you know you can be. Another short way of saying is, remember when you're 3rd grade and the teacher said, what do you want to do when you grow up? And you knew that the whole world was your oyster. You could do anything. Envision that again. Because if you can see it, you can be it.
That's right. That's right.
So
That's
envision
right.
you totally healed.
That's right. And so I just want to encourage our viewers, Nike Memoirs, from Trauma to Triumph. And, I like to do the plug that, instead of buying a card, buy a book, right? We all know women in our lives. We all do. Whether it's your mom, your aunt, your grandma, your sister, your, a coworker, whatever. Reach it. You can find this on Amazon, and just buy a book. Buy a book. Books nowadays are practically a few more dollars more than a card. you know, and I just thank you so much, Nike, for coming on today. What an honor. The time
Thank
flew,
you.
it flew by today. I didn't even know where the time went, but it did. And I want to thank all of our viewers, and also attached to this link, if you look in the about, you will know ways that you can reach out to Nike and actually, we got to keep you a little longer. Tell us about your company and
Yes. So
an event that's coming up.
awesome. So in short, I decided I wanted to be the adult that I needed growing up. And so I started a nonprofit. It's called Triple Threat Mentoring. It is for young girls that are in middle school through high school, girls of color, girls experiencing houseless and homelessness, and girls that are in foster care. And we provide one-to-one mentoring activities and so much more, a trauma-informed approach, but connecting them with powerful women that look like them, that are purpose driven. And so that people like me at that age won't have to go through life alone. And so that's what we do. Um, on my other side of my hat, Nike Greene, as a survivor of domestic violence, we know October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we have 3 amazing events coming up. October 2nd is our kickoff. It's the Day of Unity, and that is the time we'll do a candlelight, we will reflect, and we really remember those and honor those survivors and those that are gone through and how much we are moving forward in breaking the silence of violence. And so if you go on to any of the links below, you'll see about October 19th, where we'll have a film by all survivors and some organizations telling their story, as well as the domestic violence walk on October 21st.
So perfect. Okay, thank you once again, Nike. And to all of our viewers, I want to thank you for coming on this episode of Sagionic 1027. And until our next episode, may the Lord bless you, may the Lord keep you, may the Lord make his face to shine upon thee always. Blessings. Bye.
Blessings, everyone.